For decades, the German Navy insisted a submarine full of dead sailors was resting off the coast of Morocco. They were wrong by nearly 5,000 miles. The truth was sitting in less than 250 feet of water off the coast of New Jersey the entire time, and it took a group of amateur divers 6 years, 3 lives, and 1 engraved dinner knife to prove it. This is the story of U-869, and honestly, some of what I found while researching this one, I had to check twice before I believed it myself. It started with a fishing captain in 1990 who mentioned to a diver that his nets kept snagging on something enormous, roughly 60 miles off the New Jersey coast, somewhere near Point Pleasant. The coordinates didn't match any wreck on record. That diver was Bill Nagel, captain of a boat called the Seeker, and Nagel knew the wrecks off the East Coast better than almost anyone alive. If the location didn't match anything he recognised, that meant one of two things. Either the records were wrong, or there was something down there nobody had ever found. On September 2nd, 1991, Nagel took a crew of experienced wreck divers out to the site. Among them was a diver named John Chatterton, a former combat medic in Vietnam, who had become one of the most respected technical divers on the East Coast. The depth finder showed a large object sitting on the seafloor, 230 feet down. Chatterton went in first. Visibility was poor, the water was cold and dark, and as he descended, a shape began to emerge that made no sense at all. A conning tower, a hull, a submarine, German. He surfaced confused and more than a little rattled. He checked every record he could find. He contacted the Naval Historical Center in Washington. According to every official archive on both sides of the Atlantic, there was no German U-boat lost anywhere near the New Jersey coast. Every loss had supposedly been accounted for. Every wreck location had supposedly been documented. Whatever was sitting on the bottom of the Atlantic 60 miles from shore, officially, it did not exist. The divers gave it a nickname while they tried to figure out what it actually was. They called it U-Who. To understand how a fully intact German submarine ended up completely unaccounted for in American waters, you need to understand what it was doing there in the first place. U-869 was a Type 9C/40, a long-range attack submarine built at the Deschimag shipyard in Bremen and commissioned into the German Navy in January 1944. Her commander was Kapitänleutnant Helmuth Neuerberg. Her crew numbered 56 men, a mix of a few experienced sailors and a much larger number of very young ones, many barely out of their teens. By late 1944, that assignment had become close to a death sentence. Earlier in the war, German U-boats had dominated the Atlantic. By 1944, the balance had completely flipped. Allied radar, sonar, long-range aircraft, and code-breaking had turned the hunters into the hunted. Of the roughly 40,000 men who served in the German U-boat arm during the war, historians estimate around 30,000 died, a casualty rate of close to 75%, higher than any other branch of any military in the war. The men who sailed on U-869 knew those numbers. They went anyway. In November 1944, U-869 left Kiel, and after training exercises in Norway, set out across the Atlantic with orders to patrol the shipping lanes off the American coast, specifically New York and New Jersey. Partway through the crossing, German Naval Command under Karl Dönitz changed her orders and redirected her toward Gibraltar instead. It has never been confirmed that U-869 actually received that message. On February the 11th, 1945, American destroyer escorts USS Howard D. Crow and USS Coiner, part of a convoy escort off the New Jersey coast, picked up a sonar contact and dropped depth charges. Oil and debris rose to the surface. With their convoy needing protection, the ships moved on without confirming a kill. 17 days later, on February the 28th, an American destroyer escort and a French submarine chaser attacked a submarine contact near the Moroccan coast and were credited with sinking it. Post-war investigators matched that attack to U-869, and for nearly 50 years, that was the official record. A German submarine, sunk off Gibraltar, all 56 men lost. Except it wasn't off Gibraltar. It was sitting on the seafloor off New Jersey the entire time, and nobody had connected the two. Identifying the wreck took 6 years. This is the part of the story that I think is genuinely remarkable, because it wasn't the Navy or a government agency that solved it. It was a small group of recreational divers working on their own time, at a depth that scuba diving was never really designed for. 230 feet is deep enough that the risk of decompression sickness and nitrogen narcosis becomes serious with every single dive. and this wreck kept its secrets. In September 1991, divers recovered crockery from the wreck marked with a swastika and dated 1942. Useful, but not enough to identify which submarine it was. In November of that year, they recovered a stainless steel dinner knife with a wooden handle. Engraved on it was a single surname, Horenberg. It took years of research to connect that name to Martin Horenberg, the radio operator, or Funkmeister, aboard U-869, listed in German Naval Archives as lost with the boat. That was strong evidence, but on its own, it wasn't quite conclusive enough for some historians. The identification wasn't confirmed until August the 31st, 1997, when Chatterton, along with fellow divers Richie Kohler, John Yerger, and Patrick Rooney, recovered a wooden parts box from the electric motor room. Wired to it was a plastic tag, and on that tag, still legible after more than 50 years underwater, was the designation U-869. The cost of that 6-year search was 3 lives. Diving a wreck at 230 feet, inside a collapsing steel hull, in near zero visibility, is about as dangerous as recreational diving gets. Steve Feldman died on the wreck. So did Chris Rouse and his son Chris Rouse Jr., a father and son diving team who were caught by the same conditions that had claimed sailors on the boat 5 decades earlier. The men who set out to solve the mystery of U-869 ended up adding their own names to its casualty list. Their story, along with Chatterton and Kohler's, was later told in Robert Kurson's book Shadow Divers, which brought the U-869 story to a much wider audience. Even once the identity of the submarine was confirmed, one question remained unresolved, and honestly, it still is. What actually sank it? There are 2 competing theories, and the US Navy and the divers who found the wreck don't agree on which one is correct. The official US position credits USS Howard D. Crowe and USS Coiner, crediting their February 11th depth charge attack with the kill. Chatterton and Kohler, after years of studying the damage to the hull, came to a different conclusion. Late-war German torpedoes used acoustic homing, designed to steer themselves toward the sound of a ship's propeller. If a torpedo fired from U-869 missed its intended target and failed to detonate, it's possible its guidance system picked up the sound of its own submarine's propeller, instead turned around and struck the boat that fired it. It's called a circle runner, and at least 2 other German U-boats are believed to have been lost to their own torpedoes doing exactly that during the war. The divers pointed to a lack of any confirmed nearby engagement matching the destroyer account, and to damage patterns on the hull that they believed were more consistent with an internal torpedo strike than depth charges from above. The Navy has never officially adopted that theory. To this day, there is no full agreement on which explanation is correct. What isn't in dispute is what happened to the crew and to the families who spent 50 years believing their sons and husbands died off the coast of Africa. For decades, relatives of the U-869 crew had nowhere to direct their grief except toward a stretch of ocean near Gibraltar that had nothing to do with where the men actually were. Richie Kohler spent weeks in Germany after the identification was confirmed, tracking down family members, showing them photographs and evidence from the wreck. The Horenberg knife was eventually given to the sailor's daughter. Of the 56 men aboard U-869, only 1 crew member survived the war, and he was never actually on the submarine when it sailed. Herbert Guszewski, the boat's second radio officer, came down with pneumonia and pleurisy shortly before departure and was left behind. He didn't learn the true fate of his crewmates until 1999 when he saw a television documentary about the discovery. U-869 still sits where Chatterton found it, 60 miles off the New Jersey coast, in roughly 230 feet of water. Unlike military wrecks in European waters, it holds no formal war grave protection under American law, and divers can and still do visit it, though the depth and conditions remain genuinely dangerous. The steel continues to corrode in the salt water. Eventually, like every wreck, it will collapse further and become harder to read as anything more than scattered debris. For nearly 50 years, the official record insisted this submarine was somewhere it never actually was. It took a fishing captain's snagged net, a handful of divers willing to risk their lives at a depth most people would never attempt, and 1 engraved knife to put it back where it actually belonged, 60 miles off the Jersey coast, not 5,000 miles away near Gibraltar. 56 men set out believing they were headed toward one ocean. History had them recorded in an entirely different one for half a century. It only took someone willing to go looking to set the record straight. Now, if you enjoyed this video and want to see more like it, let me know in the comments, and and I'll keep making more of these. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next one, and I'll see you next time.